Forgive that long pause at the beginning of our video. We had a little miscommunication. Good evening, actually, it is right now. We're glad that you could join us. We're filming or we're recording our weekly video for the Adult Bible Study, where our topic is still tracing the footsteps of Jesus. And the idea is that in studying the life of Jesus and following as much as we can, tracing the footsteps that he made, will help us have a better picture and understanding of the life of Jesus, and it will be just something really special for us. Now, I had instructed you guys to read Luke chapter 5, verses 17 through 39, but when I started assembling the lesson, I could see that it's not going to be something we can do. I'm going to take my time and I'm going to go back just a little bit, and we're going to start at verse 12 and we're going to go through verse 16, and we may or may not go much farther than that, but it's something I think is really, really cool. And so I want you to pay close attention today. You might want to get a pencil and paper and prepare yourself to take a note or two. All right, let's pray. Father, I thank you for your word. I thank you so much for your blessings today and the things you reveal to me through your word. And Father, I just pray that I can share those with other people and that they will be blessed as well. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. I don't have my clicker, Julie, but if you'd advance it. Luke 5:12, let's read it. It says, "And it happened when he was in a certain city, that behold, a man who was full of leprosy saw Jesus, and he fell on his face and implored him, saying, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Then he put out his hand," talking about Jesus, "and touched him, saying, I am willing, be cleansed. Immediately the leprosy left him. And he charged him to tell no one, but go and show the priests and make an offering for your cleansing as the testimony to them, just as Moses commanded." Well, we're going to skip the other two verses there, but I want you to, the question I want to pose to you from what we've read here is, I know Jesus can heal. That's what the man said. He said, Lord, you are able. Let me read it. He said, read it again. He was full of leprosy. He implored him, saying, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. If you are willing. So he's saying, I know Jesus can make me well. The question is, he willing to make me well? And that's what we're going to try to answer today. Is God willing to heal me of whatever my malady happens to be? Okay? And it's a really cool subject, and I hope you pay close attention, okay? So, because we're looking for the reason. Let's just take a second and think about this fellow who came to Jesus. I don't know how much you know about leprosy. I don't know a lot about it either, but I do know that it's an awful disease. I know that it's a picture of sin. It's a very destructive thing that causes people to sometimes lose parts of their body. It disfigures them horribly. And in Jesus' day, people who had leprosy were forced to live outside the area of where everyone else lived, because it was a contagious disease and they didn't want to give it to any other person. Now, if someone by some chance were to recover from their leprosy, they were to go see the priest and offer an offering, and the priest would look at them and determine from their appearance whether there was any leprosy left in their body. So Jesus sees this guy. It says that he was full of leprosy. In other words, he didn't just have a little bit, he had a whole bunch. He may have been walking around with a disease for a long time. If you look at the pictures of the faces of people who have it, it's almost frightening. It disfigures them so terribly. And here's a guy that comes to Jesus like that, And I'll bet he didn't have any trouble getting close, because I'll bet you everybody wanted to be far away from this poor fellow. In fact, they were probably urging him to get out of there and leave him, don't get close to us. But the part that touches my heart is that the man throws himself down at Jesus' feet and says, if you're willing, you can make me clean. And Jesus, without hesitation, actually reached down and touched him, touched this poor, pitiful-looking person, and said, be cleansed. So that's what I want to hold up to you today, the goodness of the Lord and what he does. Let's go to the next slide, Julie. Now, a man filled with leprosy is the answer to the question. I posed the question, will Jesus heal me? And I just kind of was trying to be clever here, and I put a man filled with leprosy would say yes. And here's why I should expect Jesus to heal me if I have leprosy or any other disease. Julie? Because it's part of Jesus' redemptive work on the cross. Hon, why don't you hand me the little clicker so that I can prompt you with it there? And my beautiful assistant is going to bring me my little clicker here, and hopefully I use it correctly. All right. It's part of Jesus' redemptive work on the cross. Isaiah 53:4 says, well, surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Now, I added in red those two words, sickness and pain, because that is actually what it means. One of the deficiencies in the English language, and probably others, is oftentimes one single word will not describe the meaning of some other language's word. And when it says griefs, it means sickness as well, not just an emotional unhappiness, not sorrow or not sadness or something. It's talking about sickness. And it says he carried our sorrows, and the word there is pain. I had to have the words written down that they were recorded in, but it wouldn't do us any good to name them because neither one of us, you or I, know what they mean. I just looked them up in Strong's Concordance, and I was really excited to confirm it. Now, let's just move on to the next step here. Matthew 8:16 and 17 confirms the confidence that we have in Isaiah 53:4. All right? If you'd turn at home there with me to Matthew chapter 8, we're going to read, verse 17 is what we're going to focus on, but we're going to read 16 before it, okay? So let me go there. It says, when evening had come, they brought to him many who were demon-possessed, and he cast out the spirits with a word and healed all who were sick, okay? And then it says, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, he himself took our infirmities and bore our sicknesses. Okay? So Matthew chapter 8, verses 16 and 17 is confirming what we've just said about Isaiah 53:4, because Matthew is saying that this is confirmation of what was prophesied. As I recall, it was prophesied more than 700 years before Jesus went to the cross. So, it's nice to know that these things can be proven. Now, verse 17 says, he himself took our infirmities and bore our sicknesses. Okay, that's what we read just a second ago. Now, Isaiah, I just want to point out that infirmities and sicknesses agree with Isaiah 54, all right? 53:4, all right? So, there you have it. Now, Isaiah concludes what he said in chapter 53, and by his stripes we are healed. and by his stripes we are healed. I think it'd be a good thing for me to go to Isaiah 53 and just give you the whole portion that covers that, so we have a more clear picture. Isaiah 53:4 says, "Surely he has borne our griefs," or our sickness, "and carried our sorrows," or pain. "Yet we esteemed him stricken and smitten by God and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement for our peace was upon him." And then it says, "and by his stripes we are healed." Now there's a neat thing to notice here, folks, and that is this. Let me back up for a second. When I was a younger Christian, I listened to a program on the radio, and the person that was teaching the lesson was a more modern day kind of teacher. And he said, "No, that by his stripes we are healed doesn't promise healing for the body." And I went to a church, the Assemblies of God, and we always believed that covered our physical sickness. And so when I heard that, it sort of weakened my faith a little bit. And it was a long time before I can overcome that misunderstanding. Let me tell you why Isaiah 53:5 is accurate. "And by his stripes we are healed." The word says just before that, it says, "The chastisement for our peace was upon him." The chastisement of our peace was upon him. In other words, the beating that Jesus took, the stripes on his back, which laid his flesh open, it says it was for our peace with God, yes, but our personal peace. In the Jewish world, the word peace is shalom. And it doesn't mean tranquility of heart. It doesn't mean that you feel good on the inside. It means wholeness. You feel good on the inside, you feel good on the outside. It's body, mind, and spirit, okay? It's the whole person. So when Isaiah says, "and by his stripes we are healed," he is reinforcing what he's already said. He's saying that Jesus on the cross took those terrible stripes for you and me in order for us to have peace with God and healing in our body. Okay? Just that simple. So, I don't want you to miss this, okay? Isaiah predicted it. I'm just repeating myself. Isaiah predicted it. Matthew identified it. And Jesus' stripes finished it, okay? We are covered, folks. Isaiah predicted it, Matthew identified it in 8:16 and 17, and Jesus' stripes finished it in Isaiah 53:5. Okay, we can expect when we need healing, we have the right to go to God and ask for it. Okay, it's not something we should have a lot of doubt about. Okay. I probably spell shalom wrong, but just a recap of what shalom means, and we can go on to the next slide. We ask God for healing, whether by a miracle or a supernatural event, okay, or by natural means. We don't expect God to do our healing our way. An ordinary recovery is not a second-class event. I don't know. I think probably as a new Christian, I was kind of a thrill seeker. I enjoyed seeing God do great things. And so I wanted to see miracles. And when someone would be healed in a natural fashion, you might say to yourself, well, they were going to get well anyway. that's not necessarily so, okay? God heals us either by a supernatural event, a miracle, or he heals us by natural means, okay? You go to the doctor, you get a shot, whatever. You go through therapy, you spend a day or two in bed, whatever it takes to be healed, okay? Because the body is meant to heal itself, but the fact is sometimes it doesn't. And you see people who are suffering. I could probably name some unpleasant things. I don't think it's necessary. We all have friends that are ill, or maybe you're ill yourself. So what I'm trying to get across to you is that you shouldn't come to God in a reluctant way and feel like there's any doubt about whether he will heal you. If he'll heal that man with leprosy, he'll heal you too. So, but I want to tell you something, okay? What happens if God doesn't answer my prayer? What happens if my loved one that I've been praying for gets worse? What happens if they end up dying? Did God fail me? Did I not have enough faith? I want to tell you, folks, I get a little bit annoyed, more than a little bit annoyed, when I hear someone say, well, if you just had the faith, you could have had your answer. In other words, it's your fault. You didn't have faith. Folks, I've had more than one event in my life that has caused me to feel the way I do. I believe that God is sovereign. I believe that God has a right to do what he does. And if he does not answer my prayer with yes, then he has a reason, and I have to trust him. I don't mean to make light of anybody's misery, but God might have a better plan than you have, folks. God may look at the life of your loved one and say, I know that what lies ahead of them, and if they continue to live, they're going to have a problem. Or I realize there's something in their path that's going to cause them to stumble. And God doesn't want them to stumble. I often reflect on the prayer of King Hezekiah. King Hezekiah was a good man. He was faithful. And he got sick. And he was laying in his sick bed, and the prophet came to talk to him, and he said, set your house in order. You're not going to live, you're going to die. Boy, that's not good news. Now, I know we live under a new covenant and everything, so a lot of people like to use that argument when you say someone is not going to recover, and they start feeling that you don't have the faith. But the fact is, God has a plan, and he told Hezekiah that he wasn't going to live, and God had a reason that he didn't offer. And Hezekiah, the prophet, left, and he was walking across the king's courtyard. And while he was walking, Hezekiah rolled over and turned towards a wall and began to cry and pray. And he said, Lord, don't you remember the good things that I did? Don't you remember how faithful I was and how I instituted these things in this country? And I just did a lot of good things for you, Lord. Don't you remember that? And the prophet stopped because God stopped him. And he turned around and he went back. And he said, the Lord has added 15 years to your life. Now, during that 15 years, Hezekiah had a son named Manasseh, who was the worst king that Israel ever had, and he caused Israel to sin. Now, God had known what was going to happen, but he was so faithful to one man that he would not let Hezekiah die being grieved about what was going on. Now, I want to tell you, for my sake, I'd hate to know that I had only 15 years left. Well, I can honestly say I probably do have 15 or less because I'm already an old person. But the fact is, if God told you specifically, you're only going to live 15 more years, every year would be a countdown. Every year you'd be thinking about it. It's better to leave things with God. People overlook the fact that there were examples of sick people in the New Testament who were not healed. I'm going to get to that in a second. I just want to say this, okay? I get a little annoyed when people have the mental attitude that they have to have a healing or a miracle, and that somehow everyone who doesn't get that is somehow faithless, okay? I'm not a follower of many of the faith teachers. And it isn't that I know everything that they teach. I just gave up listening to them. And it was because of the dramatic stance they take on some of the things, okay? People, I said there are people, they overlooked the fact that there were examples of sick people in the New Testament who were not healed, okay? Let's take a look at that. Here's some examples. Now, Paul's thorn in the flesh was one of them. It's found in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 6 and 7, okay? Paul's thorn in the flesh. This is a classic argument between people who say God will always heal you when you're sick, and people who say, no, God is sovereign. He can heal if he wants to, okay? Now, one of the very finest ladies that I ever knew was a Bible teacher, and it was a missionary that returned from a lifetime, I believe, of service in a foreign place. And when she came home, she started teaching, and she taught that the thorn in the flesh was not an illness. There are many people who don't believe that Paul's thorn in the flesh was illness. I am not one of them, okay? I believe that Paul's thorn in the flesh was indeed a messenger of Satan who was bringing affliction to Paul. God explained to him in those verses why it was happening to him, but nonetheless, whether it was a physical affliction, and I believe it was something to do with his eyes, some illness that he had that caused his eyes to be inflamed and weep. And he fought that probably for years. And I have a feeling that Dr. Luke, who accompanied him on his missionary journeys, probably would administer medication of some kind, salve or ointment or something, because Paul had to contend with that. And the reason he had to contend with it is God told him, my grace is sufficient for you. And if you want to read about it, go to 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 6 and 7. Okay, but whether it was a physical affliction or whether it was a something else, Paul's thorn in the flesh was an unanswered prayer. Okay, now the second thing I want to mention is Trophimus. Actually, let me back up. It wasn't an unanswered prayer. It was a prayer that was answered with no. God told him no. Second thing is a guy named Trophimus. Trophimus was part of Paul's team that traveled with him, one like Timothy and Titus. And Paul wrote of Trophimus, and in 2 Corinthians 4:20, he says, Erastus stayed in Corinth, and he's telling this to Timothy, Erastus stayed in Corinth, but Trophimus I left sick in Miletus. That's a kind of an unusual statement. People seem to ignore that. Someone in Paul's own evangelistic team became sick and couldn't continue on the journey because he was ill. Now, if God always heals people who are sick, and a man like Paul was used to seeing miracles and getting healings, why would he leave Trophimus sick in Miletus? The answer is that God, for some reason, didn't answer Paul's prayer. Now, I'm a heretic for saying that, but I accept the accusation. Paul wrote also to Timothy, and he said, no longer drink water only, but use a little wine for your stomach's sake and your frequent infirmities, sicknesses. And that's 1 Timothy 5:23, okay? No longer drink water only, but use a little wine for your stomach's sake and your frequent infirmities. So Paul is telling Timothy, he's saying a couple of things here. He's saying, first he said Timothy had frequent infirmities. In other words, there's some kind of problem that Timothy might have had. Maybe he had irritable bowel syndrome. Maybe he had a weak stomach and he was constantly having a problem with his food. It's not uncommon. My own son Jeff has a problem with his stomach, and he has to take medication to keep him from becoming sick, and he has to be careful that he doesn't eat certain things and he doesn't overeat, because we'll be cleaning up if he does, okay? So he tells Timothy that. He tells him to use a little wine in a medicinal way, okay? Now, folks, whether it's wine or whether it comes from the doctor, whatever you're using to treat illness is a medicine, okay? So Paul is telling Timothy, take this medicine. I have run into people who refuse to take medicine. They feel it demonstrates a lack of faith in God. If you feel that way, that is your business. You don't have to take it. Personally, I feel like if you can avoid taking a lot of medications, you're better off, okay? But it seems like lots of us people who reach a certain point in life have got so many small things wrong with us that we spend half our income buying little things, okay? The doctor prescribes for us, blood pressure medicine, one thing after another. Anyhow, Timothy was told that he used something in a medicinal way to handle his frequent illness, okay? So what are you saying? I'm saying that Christians sometimes have problems, okay? They are part of life. I think that we can deal with our problems by seeking the Lord, okay? And I think that we have every reason to hope in the Lord. Now, I do want to tell you a story about a lady I knew. I actually didn't know her. I knew a family member of hers who told me the story. This lady was a very good Christian lady, and she was told that she had cancer. And as I understand it, she was in the early stages of cancer. She believed in divine healing, and that's great. I do too. But she said, I'm not going to accept medical treatment because I believe God is going to heal me. Now, remember I told you earlier, God can use any way He wants to heal you, all right? Any way He wants. But this lady would not accept any kind of cancer treatment, and her cancer grew progressively worse. And over a prolonged illness, she finally reached the point where she died and left her family in just distress. I'm sure it didn't help their faith a bit to think that mom told them that God was going to heal her, and then she didn't get her healing. I don't want to be critical of her. I don't have a right. But I want to tell you this. If you choose not to take medication and you believe God will heal you, that's your business, okay? But you don't have a right to do it for someone else, okay? So if someone else needs medical care, you get them to the doctor, okay? And because I believe that God has provided in our generation a lot of ways to deal with our illness. Okay, Julie? Jesus forgives and heals a man who is paralyzed. Hun, would you do me a favor and check the time and see how many minutes I've been recording for, and then I will know whether I should go further or not. 30 minutes?
Just starting. It's 29, almost
20, okay. Well, guys, you know what? I'm thinking about just making this a 30-minute Bible study instead of making it on. But I had told you to read about Jesus healing a paralyzed man. And the story begins in 5:17. Maybe I'll go just a little ways here. I'll see what I feel like when I go a little further. But anyway, let me turn there, and it's Luke chapter 5. And we're going to pick up at verse 17. Well, let me say this about what we already read. I stopped after Jesus told that man that he healed, the leprous man, to go and show himself to the priests. And verse 15 says, what follows is that the report, not necessarily the man telling it, but the report went around concerning him all the more, and great multitudes came to gather to hear and to be healed by him of their infirmities. Okay? So Jesus' reputation kept growing. And it says great multitudes, not a multitude, but a great multitude. And we've read in different places about how many thousand people Jesus would feed with loaves and fishes and things on 2 different occasions. And each time it mentions thousands, but it only mentions men. So if every person that came had a family, let's say, you could easily assume that there were 3, 4, 5 times as many as what is described. So Jesus was attracting huge crowds. You can imagine how many people were getting healed. Now, let me read the verse. It says, so he himself often withdrew into the wilderness and prayed. In other words, Jesus was so overwhelmed by this constant praying for people and constant being in a state of public speaking and so forth, that he had to find rest somewhere. Let me say this, okay? Most people haven't had too much experience. There's a few people that have been public speakers. But when you have to preach or you have to teach or you have to be in front of people, there's a certain amount of stress that's connected with it. So oftentimes a preacher, after preaching twice on a Sunday, he will be so completely exhausted that he just doesn't have any resources left. So these guys that are preaching revivals that last for days, you can imagine how much it takes out of them. Well, that's what Jesus was doing. He was nonstop ministering to other people. When he'd finish his message, then he would be laying hands on people and praying for them. And it says this in verse 17. Now it happened on a certain day, as he was teaching, that there were Pharisees and teachers of the law sitting by, who had come out of every town of Galilee, Judea, and Jerusalem. And the power of the Lord was present to heal them. I'm going to stop there. The Pharisees came out, and it says the power of the Lord was there to heal them. It wasn't talking about the Pharisees being healed. They were not physically ill. They were, I was going to say mentally ill. They had an attitude problem, okay? They had a superiority problem. They had a self-righteousness problem. They were the leaders. They were the people that knew everything. And so here they came out, not really to hear Jesus and receive what he said, but to, I think, judge him. Look for something they could find that was wrong with what he said. So that's what they were there. But the people were there to be healed. And it says the power of God was there to heal. Now next week, I'm going to pick up right here and go on. But today I'm going to stop because I have quite a bit more to talk about, and there's just not any point in making it so very, very long. All right? God bless you. I hope you have a great week, and I hope these Bible studies are a blessing to your life. God bless you, and we'll see you next week.